500. Give me a rose. People like you can't even imagine that much money. Show us what you're bronzing. $500 million is yours if you can open this safe, genius. Show us what your grandfather's ghost taught you. This is unacceptable. You need to take responsibility. Listen to that mess. He's just a child. Is it yours? No. Your mother cleans toilets. Stay in your lane, boy.
Move that boy away from my office. Marcus Wellington's voice boomed through Next Tech Corporation as he glared at 12-year-old Isaiah Harper. The child held his mechanical drawings while his mother, Diana, quickly picked up cleaning supplies from her knocked-over cart. "Sir, please, he was just," Diana began. Just what, teaching him to steal like whoever his father was? Wellington's eyes burned as he noticed the child's detailed sketches. "What is this trash?" "The vault makes a strange noise," Isaiah said quietly, pointing to the reinforced room where a mysterious safe had puzzled Harvard engineers for 4 months. Wellington's laugh turned cruel. "$500 million if you crack this vault, kid." His voice dripped with contempt. "Oh, wait, people like you probably can't imagine that much money." The boy's calm eyes never left the man who would soon wish he'd stayed silent. Have you ever seen someone's hatred destroy them? The glass buildings of San Francisco's tech district stretched endlessly beyond Next Tech Corporation's 45th floor. But inside the marble meeting room, tension hung heavy. 4 months earlier, an electrical surge had turned the company's advanced safe into a $500 million prison. The experimental microchips inside represented 6 years of development and Next Tech's entire future. Now financial ruin loomed in 2 days. Isaiah Harper shouldn't have been there at all. The 12-year-old came with his mother during her 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. cleaning shifts because babysitting cost more than Diana earned weekly. While she cleaned bathrooms and emptied waste bins, Isaiah sat quietly in break areas, drawing the machines that captivated him. Every component, every wire, every mechanical sound entered his notebook. The safe had arrived from Germany 4 months ago, a Bergman masterpiece worth more than most homes. Its fingerprint locks, titanium casing, and digital encryption should have made it unbreakable. Instead, a summer lightning storm and one power spike had turned advanced security into an expensive mystery. Harvard's smartest minds had failed. A team of German engineers flew in and departed embarrassed. Even government security experts walked away confused. Each attempt cost hundreds of thousands, and each failure pushed Next Tech closer to bankruptcy. But Isaiah heard something others didn't. Late at night, when the building emptied and quiet settled like fog, he could hear the safe's mechanical rhythm beating wrong. Something was off with its pulse. That's when problems started. Marcus Wellington had built Next Tech from nothing, turning a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire. His corner office displayed achievements, patents, and photos with world leaders. Success had hardened him into someone who saw people as either useful or obstacles. To Wellington, cleaning staff were invisible until their children started asking questions. The first confrontation happened on a Wednesday night. Wellington worked late reviewing financial reports that painted a dark picture. Next Tech's stock had fallen 35% since news of the locked safe leaked. Investors were leaving. Contracts were being canceled. He wanted coffee and found Isaiah in the executive lounge drawing quietly while his mother cleaned nearby offices. "Why is this kid here?" Wellington's voice cut through the silence like shattered glass. Deanna appeared instantly, apology already on her lips. "Mr. Wellington, I apologize sincerely. I couldn't find childcare tonight, and this isn't a daycare." His eyes fixed on Isaiah with clear disgust. "Company rules clearly state no unauthorized people after hours." Isaiah looked up from his drawings, detailed mechanical diagrams that would have impressed university professors. "I'm not causing problems, sir. I don't care what you believe you're doing." Wellington's voice dropped dangerously. "Your mother works for me. You're trespassing." From that night on, Isaiah spent his mother's shifts locked in the security room, watching guards play cards while Diana worked alone. But walls couldn't block him from hearing. Through air ducts and thin doors, the safe's irregular rhythm called to him. 3 weeks later, the second humiliation began. Wellington emerged from another failed meeting with potential investors. Without access to their prototype chips, Next Tech had nothing to sell. Desperation was taking hold when he heard a small voice from the hallway. "Excuse me, sir." Isaiah stood near the safe's chamber, notebook in hand. "That sound it makes, it sounds wrong." Wellington stopped cold. 4 security guards, 3 executives, and a janitor all turned to stare at the boy who had somehow escaped the security room. "Oh, this is perfect." Wellington's laughter bounced off marble walls. "Now the cleaning staff's children think they're engineers." The executives shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Next Tech's security director, watched from the shadows with growing interest. "I just meant," Isaiah started. "You just meant nothing." Wellington's voice carried the power of someone used to crushing opposition. "Maybe we should hire all the janitor kids as experts. What do you think, Dr. Martinez? Should we put children on payroll?" Nervous laughter filled the hallway. Isaiah's face burned, but he didn't back down. Instead, he opened his notebook and showed a page covered in precise mechanical drawings. "These are the internal components," he said softly. "I think something's stuck." Wellington grabbed the notebook, his face cycling through confusion and rage. The drawings were impossibly detailed, showing parts that weren't visible from outside the safe. Measurements, calculations, even stress points were marked with mathematical accuracy. "Where did you find these?" Wellington's knuckles turned white as he gripped the notebook. "I drew them." Isaiah's voice stayed steady despite the hostile stares around him. "I can hear how the parts move." "You can hear?" Wellington's voice broke off in disbelief. Then his expression hardened into something mean. "Look at this. Poor kid thinks he's an engineer." He held the notebook high, displaying Isaiah's work like evidence at a trial. "This is what happens when people don't understand their place." With deliberate cruelty, Wellington tore the first page, then another. Months of careful watching and precise recording fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. "Stay in your lane, boy." Each word dripped with poison. "Your mother cleans toilets. You shut up and stay invisible." Isaiah watched his work destroyed but didn't cry. He'd memorized every line, every calculation. The notebook was just paper. The knowledge lived in his mind. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, her voice cutting through the toxic atmosphere. "Marcus, that was unnecessary." "Was it?" Wellington's eyes blazed with self-righteous fury. "We're losing money while some poor kid plays engineer. I won't tolerate distractions." But late that night, when Wellington thought no one was watching, Dr. Martinez collected the torn pages from the trash. What she saw in those fragments would change everything. The third escalation came during a company-wide meeting about Next Tech's uncertain future. Employees packed the main hall while their CEO explained the company's terrible situation. Without access to their prototype chips, massive job cuts were inevitable. "We've tried everything," Wellington announced to 350 worried faces. "The safe remains impossible to open." That's when Isaiah made his biggest mistake. He'd been sitting in the back with his mother, invisible among the crowd, when Wellington's words sparked recognition. "It's not impossible," the boy said, his young voice somehow carrying across the silent hall. "It just went back to 1966 operation mode." Every head turned. 350 pairs of eyes focused on a 12-year-old boy who had just contradicted their billionaire CEO in public. The silence stretched like a held breath before Wellington's laughter shattered it. "Did everyone hear that?" His voice boomed through speakers that carried his words to every corner of the room. "Our child genius has solved what Harvard couldn't." More laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous, uncertain, but growing louder as Wellington's mockery gave them permission to join. "Please enlighten us," Wellington continued, his tone dripping with theatrical sarcasm. "How exactly does a safe go back to anything?" Isaiah stood slowly, his mother's hand trying to pull him back down. "When power surges hit old Bergman safes with modern upgrades, they default to original mechanical operation. The digital overlay masks the sounds, but underneath, a child is embarrassing himself." Wellington's voice cut through the explanation like a blade. "And embarrassing his mother, who clearly hasn't taught him when to speak and when to stay silent." The words hit Diana like physical blows. Around her, coworkers avoided eye contact while their jobs hung in the balance. "I apologize for my son," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You should." Wellington's gaze fixed on Isaiah with laser intensity. "But apologies don't solve our problem, do they? Your boy's fantasies certainly won't." The meeting continued, but Isaiah had learned a terrible lesson about speaking truth to power. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more. The fourth and final escalation came 4 days later when desperation drove Wellington to his breaking point. Security footage had captured Isaiah studying the safe during his mother's shifts. Despite being confined to the security room, the boy had somehow observed the vault's behavior patterns for weeks. His new notebook, hidden from Wellington's previous rage, contained even more detailed analysis. Dr. Martinez had been watching too. The fragments of Isaiah's original drawings had revealed an understanding of mechanical engineering that defied explanation. She'd quietly researched the boy's family and discovered something remarkable. Thomas Harper, Isaiah's grandfather, had been Chicago's most respected locksmith before his death. The man who'd helped design security systems for Boeing, Caterpillar, and General Electric had apparently passed more than just tools to his grandson. But Wellington saw only threat. "I will not have some poor kid wandering my halls like he owns the place." The CEO's voice thundered through an emergency staff meeting. "This ends tonight." Diana stood before the executive table like a defendant awaiting verdict. Behind her, Isaiah waited in the hallway, his fate being decided by men in expensive suits. "Your son has become a distraction we cannot afford," Wellington continued, his words carefully chosen for maximum damage. "Employees are starting to listen to a child instead of their leadership." "He's just curious about machines," Diana pleaded. "It's how his grandfather raised him. His grandfather is dead, and unless you control your son, you'll both be unemployed." Wellington leaned forward, his threat carrying the weight of absolute power. "Find another job or find another babysitter. I won't see that boy in my building again." The ultimatum hung in the air like poison. Diana's choices had narrowed to impossible: abandon her son or lose the income that kept them housed and fed. That's when fate intervened in the form of Nextech's final board meeting. Investors had demanded explanations. Stock prices were falling. The media was calling Nextech's situation the most expensive lockout in corporate history. Bankruptcy papers sat ready for signature. Wellington faced his directors like a general planning a last stand. Charts showed their dwindling resources. Every day the safe remained locked cost another 100,000 in interest payments and lost opportunities. "We need a miracle," board member James Patterson said quietly, "or we need to accept defeat." That's when Wellington spotted Isaiah's notebook lying on Dr. Martinez's chair. The security chief had been studying the boy's latest observations. Rage exploded through the CEO's careful composure as he recognized the precise mechanical diagrams. "Are you serious?" Wellington's voice cracked with fury. "That poor kid is still playing engineer while we're facing bankruptcy." He snatched the notebook, his hands shaking with rage and desperation. Page after page revealed insights that had eluded expensive experts. The boy had identified patterns, frequencies, and mechanical behaviors that suggested solutions. In that moment, Marcus Wellington's sanity snapped. "You know what?" He held the notebook high like a weapon. "$500 million if this little genius can open our safe. I'll give his mama $1 million just for the entertainment value." The words exploded from his mouth before rational thought could stop them. Exhaustion, desperation, and racial hatred had finally converged into a challenge that would destroy everything he'd built. Dr. Martinez spoke carefully. "Marcus, if the boy actually understands the mechanism, then I'll personally hand him $500 million. Wellington's laughter had an edge of hysteria. "Better yet, I'll make him CEO. How's that for your diversity initiatives?" The executives exchanged worried glances. Their leader was clearly unraveling, but no one dared challenge him directly. In the hallway outside, Isaiah pressed his small hand against the safe's cold surface and listened to its mechanical heartbeat. His grandfather's voice whispered from memory, teaching patience and precision. The boy had no idea that his billionaire tormentor had just signed his own destruction warrant. But what this 12-year-old learned from his grandfather would make Wellington sarcastic, offer the most expensive joke in San Francisco history. In Chicago's industrial heart, Thomas Harper's basement workshop was a cathedral of precision. Vintage tools lined pegboard walls like surgical instruments. The air smelled of machine oil and metal shavings, punctuated by the tick-tick-tick of grandfather clocks he repaired for wealthy clients who never knew his name. Thomas was Chicago's ghost genius. The black locksmith secretly consulted when industrial giants hit walls. Boeing called at midnight for executive safe malfunctions. Caterpillar summoned him through service entrances when German experts failed. He arrived quietly, solved problems, and left without credit. His gift was supernatural, diagnosing any mechanism by sound alone. "Every machine has a heartbeat," he told 6-year-old Isaiah during their first lesson. "Close your eyes and listen." The boy sat cross-legged on concrete floors, surrounded by disassembled clocks and vintage safes. His grandfather's workshop was a mechanical museum where history lived in springs and precision-cut steel. "What do you hear, grandson?" The big clock sounds tired. The little one sounds hungry. Thomas's weathered hands stilled. In 65 years of listening to machines, no one had described their sounds so accurately. The grandfather clock needed mainspring replacement. The mantle clock required lubrication. The gift had passed to another generation. Summer afternoons became mechanical poetry lessons. Thomas taught that wealthy people built complicated locks when frightened, but always left themselves simple escape routes. "Rich folks think complexity equals security," Thomas explained, showing Isaiah a 1960s Bergman safe. "But they're human. They forget combinations, panic during emergencies, so they build back doors." "Why keep back doors secret? Because then they wouldn't be secrets." Thomas's fingers traced intricate mechanisms. "Every lock tells a story about its owner, their fears, habits, blind spots." He opened safe after safe using techniques that seemed like magic. But Isaiah learned the science. Metal expansion from temperature, humidity effects on mechanisms, why certain combinations felt right to human psychology. "Your ears are better than mine," Thomas admitted when 9-year-old Isaiah diagnosed a timing issue he'd missed. "But ears without wisdom are just noise. Remember, listen first, think second, act third, but when you act, be certain." The motto became Isaiah's compass through a world that consistently underestimated him. At 10, Isaiah fixed the community center's heating during a December blizzard. Adult repair teams had failed for 4 days while families shivered in shelters. The boy listened to furnace rhythms, identified a valve obstruction, and restored warmth to 350 neighbors. "Lucky guess," people said. At 11, he repaired the school principal's vintage Mustang that mechanics had declared hopeless. Isaiah heard irregular engine breathing, traced compression issues to hairline cylinder cracks, and suggested repairs that saved Mrs. Thompson $4,000. "Someone must have helped him," they whispered. Thomas watched his grandson's gifts dismissed repeatedly. Society's blindness to black excellence was predictable as sunrise, but he prepared Isaiah for battles ahead. "Someday, grandson, someone will desperately need what you know. When that day comes, be ready, not for their approval, for your purpose." Thomas's final lesson came during his last summer. Pancreatic cancer was stealing him piece by piece, but his mind remained sharp as surgical steel. "The old safes are disappearing," he told Isaiah, pointing toward vintage mechanisms. "Companies think digital security is better, but metal remembers. Springs remember. When electronics fail, old knowledge becomes precious." He made Isaiah memorize every detail about 1960s Bergmans: internal architecture, psychological patterns of original owners, Depression-era mindset influencing their design. "Rich men from that time feared losing everything again," Thomas explained. "They built escape hatches using personal numbers, founding dates, anniversaries, children's birthdays. Fear made them sentimental." 4 months later, Thomas passed peacefully in his workshop chair, surrounded by machines he'd spent a lifetime understanding. Isaiah inherited more than tools. He carried forward philosophy transcending mechanical knowledge. Every problem had solutions if you listened carefully. Every lock had keys if you understood the lockmaker's heart. Now working night shifts beside his mother in San Francisco's gleaming towers, Isaiah felt his grandfather's presence. The experimental safe's irregular heartbeat called to him through marble walls and bulletproof glass. Thomas's voice whispered from memory about patience, precision, and the moment when preparation meets opportunity. The boy clutched his worn notebook filled with observations that had earned him mockery and threats, and remembered his grandfather's final words. When they need you most, they'll fight you hardest, but truth has its own timing. Your moment will come. In Next Tech's conference room, where a billionaire's hatred had just created an impossible challenge, that moment was approaching faster than anyone imagined. 20 hours until bankruptcy. Next Tech's emergency board meeting had devolved into controlled panic as directors faced financial annihilation. Stock prices fell 45% in 4 days. Major investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. Marcus Wellington stood before the conference table where his empire was dying. Charts showed dwindling resources. Every hour the safe remained locked cost another 100,000 in interest and lost opportunities. "We need a miracle," board member James Patterson said quietly. That's when Wellington's rage-fueled challenge echoed through the room like a death sentence. "$500 million if this little genius can open our safe." The words hung like poison while executives exchanged worried glances. Their CEO was clearly unraveling, but no one dared challenge him. Dr. Sarah Martinez cleared her throat carefully. "Marcus, if the boy actually understands the mechanism, then I'll personally hand him $500 million. Better yet, I'll make him CEO." Martinez had spent 4 days studying fragments of Isaiah's notebook. The boy's mechanical understanding defied explanation. His grandfather's reputation in Chicago's industrial circles was legendary. "What if we made this official?" she suggested. "Official how?" "Company-wide announcement, full transparency. If he fails, we document exhausting every option. If he succeeds..." "He won't succeed, but fine. Let's give Next Tech one last circus before the funeral." Within an hour, every employee received emergency notification. The company's final safe attempt would be live-streamed to investors, media, and public. Next Tech's last card was a 12-year-old boy. The auditorium filled quickly. 350 worried employees packed seats while cameras positioned for coverage. Tech journalists expected to document corporate death. What they got was far more explosive. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wellington's voice boomed through the speakers. "Today Next Tech makes its final attempt." Behind him, a massive screen showed the vault that had defeated international experts for 4 months. "I'm offering $500 million to anyone who can open this safe." He paused, eyes scanning until they found Isaiah beside his mother in the back. "But wait, our resident child prodigy thinks he knows better than Harvard engineers." Every head turned toward the small black boy. Isaiah felt hundreds of stares, but kept his expression steady. "So here's my offer," Wellington continued, smile predatory. $500 million if the kid can open what our best minds couldn't." Gasps rippled through the auditorium. Online viewers, the live stream had attracted 60,000, exploded in comments ranging from disbelief to outrage. "Of course, when he fails, both he and his mother will be permanently banned from Next Tech. We can't have distractions during our final days." Diana Harper gripped her son's shoulder protectively. The ultimatum was clear. Failure cost them everything. Dr. Martinez stood from the front row. "I'd like to state for the record that this child's observations show remarkable insight." "Dr. Martinez, are you seriously validating this circus?" "I'm validating precision." She held up reconstructed notebook pages. "These drawings show understanding our experts missed. Thomas Harper was Chicago's most respected mechanical engineer. His grandson inherited more than tools." Thomas's name electrified the room. Older employees recognized the legendary locksmith's reputation. Suddenly, the boy wasn't just a janitor's son. He was a legacy incarnate. "Fine, let's see if DNA trumps education." Wellington gestured toward the safe's chamber where technicians had positioned cameras. "The stage is yours, young genius. Show us what your grandfather's ghost taught you." Isaiah stood slowly. His mother's eyes reflected pride mixed with terror. 350 coworkers watched as he walked toward certain humiliation. "Wait," Martinez called out. For the record, what do you hear when you listen to the safe? Isaiah paused, his young voice carrying clearly. It sounds like a grandfather clock wound too tight. The mainspring fights against a secondary mechanism that shouldn't be engaged. Technical precision from a 12-year-old silenced the room. Even Wellington's smirk faltered. The power surge created feedback between digital systems and the original 1966 mechanical core, Isaiah continued. Electronic security failed, but instead of defaulting to open, it triggered Depression-era protocols protecting against total system failure. Martinez nodded. That explains why electronic bypass attempts failed. Electronics can't override psychological security. The backup system isn't about technology. It's about understanding who commissioned this safe in 1966. Wellington's laughter exploded through speakers. Psychology, the boy thinks he's a therapist. But the livestream audience was captivated. Comments poured faster than moderators could process. Viewer counts surged past 120,000 as social media amplified the story. Hashtags trended worldwide. Major news outlets picked up the feed. This wasn't just corporate drama. It was David versus Goliath with racial justice undertones resonating across platforms. The challenge stands, Wellington announced with finality. $500 million if this child succeeds, permanent banishment if he fails. Isaiah approached the safe's chamber like a gladiator entering the arena. Behind bulletproof glass, the massive vault waited, a steel mountain that had humbled the world's finest minds. He unpacked his grandfather's worn leather tool roll, each implement polished by decades of use. Against the safe's bulk, antique tools looked impossibly small. "Any final words of wisdom?" Wellington called mockingly. Isaiah looked back at the crowd, finding his mother's face among hundreds. "My grandfather taught me that rich people make complicated locks when scared, but they always leave simple ways for themselves." "What makes you understand fear better than Harvard graduates?" The boy's answer was barely a whisper, but the acoustics carried it clearly. "Because scared people think like my grandfather did during the Depression, and he taught me how they think." For the first time, Wellington felt uncertainty flicker. The boy's confidence wasn't bravado. It was quiet certainty backed by generational knowledge. But $500 million was impossible. The challenge was safe, wasn't it? The auditorium fell silent as Isaiah approached the bulletproof chamber housing Next Tech's $500 million mystery. Camera feeds broadcast his small figure against the industrial safe to over 180,000 viewers worldwide. Comments flooded social media platforms faster than moderators could process. Behind the glass, the vault loomed like a metallic monolith, 7 feet tall, 4 feet wide, weighing nearly 4 tons. German engineering merged with American craftsmanship in a security masterpiece that had defeated the world's most sophisticated minds. But Isaiah saw something else entirely. He pressed his small ear against the cold bulletproof barrier, closing his eyes as his grandfather had taught him. The auditorium's air conditioning hummed. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the distance, elevator cables whispered through building shafts. But beneath it all, the safe sang its mechanical secrets to anyone willing to listen. 1966 Bergman Executive Pride, Model EP2600, serial number ending in 553, manufactured in Munich, Germany, between April and July of that year. Isaiah's voice carried clearly through the chamber's audio system. Every word hit the room like a physical blow. Dr. Martinez pulled up Next Tech's acquisition records on her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. The safe's documentation appeared, specifications that had required weeks of research when the company first purchased the vault. Serial number EP2600553. Manufacturer date June 1966. Munich, Germany. Model Executive Pride. Perfect accuracy from sound alone. "That's impossible," whispered James Patterson from the board seat. "Those records weren't public. How could he—" "The gear ratios," Isaiah continued, his small hands tracing invisible patterns against the glass. "Bergman used a specific 5-2-1 reduction in their 1966 luxury models. I can hear the harmonic frequencies when internal mechanisms engage. It's like a fingerprint." Wellington's laughter had an edge of hysteria. "Lucky guess. Anyone could have researched those specifications. But Dr. Martinez was already pulling additional documentation, manufacturing details that weren't in public records, technical specifications that required security clearance to access, details that a 12-year-old janitor's son shouldn't have known. Everything Isaiah said checked out. The original owner was someone who survived the 1929 crash, the boy added, his ear still pressed against the barrier. I can hear it in the backup mechanism's design philosophy. This isn't just about keeping people out. It's about keeping wealth safe during total system collapse. The livestream audience exploded. Viewer count surged past 240,000 as major news networks began broadcasting the feed. Trending topics dominated social platforms. In the auditorium, 350 employees sat in stunned silence as a 12-year-old demonstrated knowledge that had eluded international experts. Bergman's 1966 luxury line incorporated Depression-era psychological security, Isaiah explained, his young voice carrying technical precision that chilled the room. Rich clients who'd lived through financial collapse wanted more than electronic locks. They wanted mechanical certainty that would function even if the entire electrical grid failed. Dr. Martinez nodded slowly, her professional respect growing with each revelation. That would explain why our electronic bypass attempts triggered additional security protocols instead of opening the vault. The safe doesn't trust electronics, Isaiah said simply. It was designed by people who'd watched their fortunes disappear overnight when systems they trusted failed them. Wellington's confidence began cracking like ice under pressure. The boy's explanations weren't guesswork. They demonstrated understanding of historical psychology, mechanical engineering, and acoustic analysis that defied explanation. Isaiah stepped back from the glass, his expression thoughtful. The power surge 4 months ago didn't break anything. It triggered a failsafe that returned the safe to 1966 operational mode. Explain, Dr. Martinez said, her voice tight with professional curiosity. Modern digital overlays were added to update the safe's security, but the original mechanical heart remained intact. When electrical systems detected unusual power fluctuations, they assumed the building was under attack. The boy's hands moved as he spoke, illustrating concepts that Yale engineering professors would struggle to explain clearly. During the 1960s, wealthy individuals feared both government seizure and social upheaval. They programmed their safes to lock down completely if external systems suggested crisis conditions. The power surge convinced the safe that society was collapsing. Murmurs rippled through the auditorium. Online viewers shared the feed across platforms, adding commentary that ranged from amazement to disbelief. So while our experts focused on modern electronics, Martinez said slowly, the safe had actually reverted to Depression-era operation protocols. Exactly. It's not malfunctioning. It's protecting itself exactly as designed. The original owner programmed psychological failsafes based on trauma from 1929. They built this safe to survive another Great Depression. Wellington's face had gone pale beneath his artificial tan. That's speculation. You can't possibly know the original owner's psychological state. I can hear it in the mechanism's response patterns, Isaiah replied calmly. Fear leaves mechanical fingerprints. Cautious people wind springs tighter. Traumatized people build redundant systems. Wealthy people who'd lost everything once designed escape routes only they understand. The explanation hit like revelation. Every failed attempt to open the safe had approached it as a modern security device. But this 12-year-old understood it as a historical artifact built by psychological survivors of economic catastrophe. The final sequence requires 3 simultaneous conditions, Isaiah announced, his voice carrying new authority. Mechanical manipulation, psychological understanding, and perfect timing based on internal temperature cycles. He knelt beside his grandfather's tool roll, selecting instruments worn smooth by generations of use. Against the safe's bulk, the antique tools looked impossibly delicate. Modern experts applied force and technology, but this safe responds to finesse and patience. The original owner was someone who understood that true security comes from subtlety, not strength. What kind of timing? Dr. Martinez asked, now completely invested in the boy's methodology. Metal expands and contracts with temperature variations. The safe's internal mechanisms operate on tolerances measured in thousandths of inches. At specific temperature points, clearances align to allow proper sequential operation. Isaiah checked a small thermometer from his grandfather's kit, an instrument that looked older than the building they stood in. We're approaching optimal thermal conditions now. In approximately 7 minutes, internal metal expansion will reach the precise point where the 1966 backup sequence can engage. The specificity was staggering. No expert had considered temperature-based timing. No consultant had calculated thermal expansion effects on mechanical clearances. But even with perfect timing, the sequence requires understanding the original owner's psychological patterns, Isaiah continued. This particular safe was commissioned by someone who'd lived through financial collapse. They chose backup combinations based on personal significance, not random numbers. How could you possibly know what numbers meant something to a dead person? Wellington's voice cracked with desperation. Because scared people think alike, Isaiah replied with devastating simplicity. My grandfather taught me that wealthy survivors of the Depression used similar psychological patterns, important dates that gave them hope during dark times. Usually company founding dates, children's birth dates, or anniversary dates, numbers that reminded them why they were fighting to rebuild. The boy's hands moved over his tools with surgical precision, selecting each instrument for specific mechanical purposes that the audience couldn't understand but somehow trusted completely. Next Tech's original building was constructed in 1964, Isaiah noted. The safe was installed 3 years later. I'm betting the original owner chose numbers connected to this company's founding because it represented new hope after old losses. Wellington's breathing had become labored. Everything the boy said made terrible sense. The safe wasn't just a security device. It was a psychological artifact from an era when wealthy people had learned not to trust anything except their own carefully hidden secrets. The combination isn't random, Isaiah concluded, his small fingers poised over instruments that seemed impossibly inadequate for the task ahead. It's emotional, and emotions follow patterns that my grandfather spent 65 years learning to read. The auditorium held its breath. Online viewer count had surged past 350,000 as news networks interrupted regular programming. Social media exploded with real-time commentary from mechanical engineers, historians, and psychology professors who couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Temperature approaching optimal range, Isaiah announced quietly. The safe is ready to remember 1966. For the first time since issuing his challenge, Marcus Wellington understood that he might have made the most expensive mistake in corporate history. The boy's confidence wasn't childish bravado. It was quiet certainty backed by generational wisdom, perfect acoustic analysis, and understanding that transcended anything Harvard had taught. Isaiah looked up at the cameras broadcasting his every move to hundreds of thousands of viewers worldwide. My grandfather always said that rich people make the hardest locks, but they always leave the easiest ways in for themselves. Now I'm going to show you what he meant. The temperature gauge in Isaiah's weathered thermometer hit the precise mark his grandfather had taught him to recognize. Metal expansion had reached optimal alignment. Internal mechanisms that had remained frozen for 4 months were ready to dance again. Absolute silence filled the auditorium. 350 employees held their breath while 410,000 viewers worldwide watched through live stream feeds that had crashed news websites and dominated social media trends. Isaiah knelt before the massive safe like a young knight facing an ancient dragon. His grandfather's antique tools gleamed under camera lights, instruments that had opened thousands of locks across 7 decades of patient craftsmanship. Beginning the sequence, he whispered, his small voice carrying clearly through audio systems. Remember, this safe thinks it's 1966. I have to think like someone from that time, too. His tiny fingers found the safe's primary dial, worn smooth by countless attempts from frustrated experts. But where others had applied force and technology, Isaiah offered gentle conversation. "Hello, old friend," he murmured, words that Thomas Harper had taught him to speak to stubborn mechanisms. "I know you're scared, I know you've been hurt, but it's time to trust again." The dial responded to feather touches that barely disturbed its surface. Isaiah's movements flowed like water, each rotation precise to fractions of degrees that his ears detected through microscopic changes in internal resistance. First number 20. The year Nextech's founder had been born, etched into corporate history that Isaiah had memorized from lobby plaques. Click. The sound was barely audible, but Isaiah's trained ear caught the subtle shift in mechanical tension. One tumbler had fallen into place after 4 months of stubborn resistance. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her professional fascination overriding workplace protocol. How did you know that number? Scared rich people choose numbers that remind them why they're fighting, Isaiah replied without breaking concentration. Mr. Harrison founded Nextech to prove his father wrong. His birth year represented the beginning of his determination. Second number, 64. The year Nextech's first building had been constructed, representing hope rebuilt from ashes. Click. Another tumbler surrendered to patient precision. The safe's mechanical heartbeat changed rhythm, ancient springs relaxing as they recognized the psychological keys Thomas Harper had taught his grandson to find. Wellington's hands shook as sweat stained his $6,000 suit. The boy's explanations made terrible sense. The safe's original owner had indeed programmed backup sequences using emotionally significant numbers that reminded him why wealth was worth protecting. "This can't be happening," Wellington whispered, but his voice carried clearly through the auditorium's perfect acoustics. "It's happening because you made it happen," Isaiah said softly, his concentration never wavering from the delicate work before him. "You thought my grandfather's wisdom was worthless, but wisdom doesn't care what you think." Third number, 67. The year the safe itself had been commissioned, representing the moment when trauma transformed into security. Click. The final tumbler fell into place with a sound like distant thunder. Internal mechanisms that had remained frozen for 120 days began moving again, responding to commands from a 12-year-old boy who understood their psychological DNA. "Now comes the hard part," Isaiah breathed, his small hand selecting his grandfather's most delicate tool, a timing instrument designed for watchmaker precision. The mechanical sequence requires perfect rhythm. Too fast and the failsafe engages. Too slow and the system resets. It has to flow like music that only the safe can hear. His fingers began the final dance Thomas Harper had taught him during those precious summer afternoons in Chicago's basement workshop. Touch light as butterfly wings, timing precise as heartbeats, patience infinite as love. The safe responded to whispered mechanical poetry that transcended textbook knowledge. Springs sang, gears harmonized. Ancient security protocols recognized the gentle authority of someone who understood their deepest fears. Diana Harper pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son perform miracles with tools older than she was. Around her, 350 coworkers had forgotten to breathe. Online viewers erupted in comments that crashed servers and spawned hashtags trending across 6 continents. News anchors interrupted regular programming. Financial markets suspended trading on Nextech stock pending extraordinary developments. "Almost there," Isaiah whispered, his young voice carrying the weight of generations. "Just like Grandpa Thomas taught me, when you find the heart of the machine, touch it like you're waking someone you love." The final sequence required 3 simultaneous actions that had defeated every expert who'd attempted them. But Isaiah performed them with fluid grace that made complexity look like simplicity itself. His left hand provided mechanical pressure. His right hand monitored acoustic feedback. His heart provided the patience that only comes from understanding machines as living beings with their own fears and hopes. 3 perfect clicks in rhythm with a child's heartbeat. Brief pause as ancient systems recognized legitimate access. Then, with a sound like distant thunder rolling across summer skis, the massive safe door swung open smoothly under the tiny hand of a 12-year-old boy. Inside, gleaming prototype microchips worth exactly $500 million reflected camera lights like technological treasure that had waited 4 months for someone wise enough to understand that the oldest keys sometimes open the newest doors. The auditorium exploded. The explosion of applause lasted 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Camera feeds captured tears streaming down faces of hardened executives who'd witnessed the impossible. Online viewers crashed Next Tech servers as 470,000 people simultaneously tried to share footage of a 12-year-old boy opening a safe that had defeated Harvard. Dr. Sarah Martinez was the first to act. "Emergency board resolution," she announced, her voice cutting through celebration with professional authority. Next Tech hereby establishes the Thomas Harper Young Genius Fellowship Program effective immediately. She stood before the auditorium like a general delivering victory terms. Isaiah Harper will receive full educational funding from elementary through doctoral studies, personal mentorship by industry leaders, and immediate enrollment in Berkeley's Gifted Youth Academy. James Patterson nodded from the board seating. Motion approved unanimously. The boy's patent application for auditory mechanical analysis method will be filed under his name with full corporate backing. Furthermore, Dr. Martinez continued, her smile growing wider, Diana Harper is hereby promoted to Director of Facilities Management with a starting salary of $130,000 annually, plus comprehensive health care and housing assistance. Diana collapsed into her seat, overcome by reversals of fortune that seemed too magnificent to believe. Her son had just transformed their lives with knowledge passed down through generations of undervalued brilliance. The company will also establish the Thomas Harper Innovation Workshop, Martinez announced. A fully equipped laboratory where young minds can explore mechanical engineering with proper tools and guidance. Isaiah stood before the open safe, his grandfather's worn tools still in his small hands. Around him, corporate executives applauded like he was a conquering hero, rather than a janitor's son who'd been threatened with banishment hours earlier. "There's one more thing," Dr. Martinez said, her voice carrying emotional weight. "Thomas Harper's tools will be permanently displayed in our main lobby with the inscription, 'Dedicated to masters who teach the future. Wisdom has no color, genius has no age.'" The boy's eyes filled with tears at the honor paid to his grandfather's memory. Thomas's basement workshop wisdom had just elevated his grandson from poverty to promise in a single afternoon. But this was only the beginning. Major universities were already reaching out. Engineering societies wanted him as their youngest member. Tech companies competed to sponsor his education. A 12-year-old had just proven that underestimation is merely an opportunity waiting for its moment to shine. Within 7 hours, Marcus Wellington's racist mockery had exploded across every social platform on Earth. The hashtag about the $500 million safe became the most viral corporate story in internet history, accompanied by video compilations of his cruelest moments toward a 12-year-old genius. The destruction unfolded with surgical precision. Hour 1, news outlets picked up the live-stream footage. CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera interrupted regular programming to broadcast Isaiah's triumph alongside Wellington's venomous quotes. "People like you probably can't imagine that much money," played on infinite repeat across cable networks. Hour 7, Next Tech stock price began falling as investors fled a company led by someone who'd publicly humiliated a child genius. Trading volume exploded as institutional investors dumped shares worth billions. Hour 14, corporate partners issued statements distancing themselves from Wellington's unacceptable behavior. Apple, Amazon, and Tesla canceled pending contracts worth hundreds of millions, citing fundamental misalignment with our values. Hour 20, the emergency board meeting convened with one item on the agenda: damage control. James Patterson read prepared statements from major shareholders demanding immediate action. "Marcus," Patterson said, his voice carrying finality, "the board has lost confidence in your leadership. Your behavior toward that child has created irreparable damage to our corporate reputation." Wellington sat alone at the conference table where he'd once wielded absolute power. Around him, directors who'd feared his authority now delivered unanimous verdict. "This is an overreaction," Wellington protested, but his voice carried no conviction. "Market volatility will settle. The media cycle will move on." "The media cycle has made you the face of corporate racism," board member Jennifer Chen replied coldly. "Our largest investors are questioning whether Next Tech can survive association with your leadership." Hour 26. The vote was unanimous. Marcus Wellington was terminated as CEO effective immediately with minimal severance and forfeiture of stock options worth $18 million. Dr. Sarah Martinez was named interim CEO, to a standing ovation from employees who'd witnessed Wellington's cruelty for years. Hour 40, social media justice accelerated beyond corporate walls. Hashtags trended globally as millions shared their own stories of workplace racism. The billionaire's personal social media accounts were suspended after threats overwhelmed platform moderators. Forbes removed Wellington from their wealth rankings. Professional networks deactivated his profiles. Country clubs revoked his memberships. The social infrastructure of wealth crumbled under viral outrage. Hour 53, legal consequences materialized as civil rights organizations filed discrimination lawsuits. The NAACP announced a formal investigation into Next-Tech's workplace culture under Wellington's leadership. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source: his own recorded words. Security footage from the past 7 months revealed a pattern of racist behavior that destroyed any claim of isolated incidents. Every cruel comment, every dismissive gesture, every moment of calculated humiliation was preserved in high definition. The man who'd built an empire through technical innovation was destroyed by technology's perfect memory. The ultimate irony: Wellington's half-billion-dollar challenge became the most expensive joke in corporate history. His net worth collapsed from $60 million to negative territory as legal fees mounted, and assets were seized to cover corporate damages. Under Dr. Martinez's leadership, Next-Tech implemented sweeping changes. The All Minds Matter initiative provided educational support for employee families. Cleaning staff received profit sharing and unprecedented respect. The company became an industry leader in diversity and inclusion. Diana Harper's promotion inspired other service workers to speak up about their own brilliant children. Thomas Harper's workshop techniques were incorporated into engineering curricula at major universities. Wellington had created his own destruction through filmed cruelty broadcast to millions. No revenge was necessary. His own words and actions had provided complete accountability. The man who dismissed a 12-year-old genius as worthless learned that wisdom has its own timing, and karma keeps perfect books. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest consequences. Sometimes the cruelest jokes become the most expensive lessons. And sometimes a dead grandfather's teachings become a living boy's triumph over institutional hatred. 2 years later, 14-year-old Isaiah Harper leads Next-Tech's Hidden Genius Initiative, discovering brilliant minds in unexpected places. Under Dr. Martinez's inclusive leadership, the company's stock reached all-time highs while revolutionizing how San Francisco values human potential. Thomas Harper's basement workshop was reconstructed as Next-Tech's Heritage Innovation Lab, where vintage tools guide cutting-edge discoveries. The inscription reads, "Where wisdom meets tomorrow, honoring those who teach the future." Marcus Wellington's former corner office became Isaiah's study space, where a boy once dismissed as worthless now designs technology that serves underrepresented communities. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Sometimes the biggest fortunes aren't measured in dollars, but in wisdom passed through generations of underestimated brilliance. If you were Wellington, would you have recognized Isaiah's genius or let prejudice blind you to talent? Sharp-eyed viewers will notice that Isaiah already knew the safe's internal structure, proving genius was there all along. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more.